I'll never forget the scream. It wasn't just loud, it sounded like pain, fear, and betrayal all rolled into one. I was sitting outside Ikena's house that night in Lagos, just waiting for him to come home. I'd seen Obinna earlier, pacing like a restless lion. But when I heard that scream, I froze. Something told me I was about to witness a horror I'd never unsee. I should probably explain. My name is Chike. I was Ikena's friend, his neighbor, and sometimes his business partner. Ikena was a self-made man, running a successful spare parts business. He'd worked his way up, building a life many could only dream of. He was generous too. He built a house for his parents back in the village, sent money home regularly, and even got his younger brother Obinna a job in Lagos. Obinna, though, was nothing like Ikena. Where Ikena worked hard, Obinna complained. Where Ikena was kind, Obinna was bitter. I'd seen the way he looked at Ikena, like he was measuring himself against his brother and coming up short every time. It wasn't always this way. Back in the village, they had been inseparable. Ikena used to tell me stories of how they would go fishing together, share the last piece of yam, and dream about making it big in Lagos. They were just boys then, innocent and hopeful. But when Ikena started sending money home from Lagos, everything changed. People praised Ikena endlessly. His name became a badge of honor in the village. Their parents beamed with pride, and everyone wanted to be associated with them. Obinna, still struggling to find his way, couldn't escape the comparisons. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" their father would ask. "He's out there making us proud while you waste away here." I think that was when the resentment started. It grew quietly at first, like a weed. By the time Ikena brought Obinna to Lagos to help him get on his feet, the bitterness had taken root. Ikena believed he was giving his brother a fresh start. He got him a job at the shop, a room to stay in, and even helped him learn the ropes of the business. But no matter what Ikena did, it wasn't enough. Obinna couldn't see the opportunities, he could only see what he didn't have. Over time, the tension between them became harder to ignore. Ikena tried to brush it off. "He'll come around," he'd say, more to himself than to me. "He just needs time." But I could see it was wearing on him. Ikena was a good man, but even he had his limits. The final straw came a week before everything fell apart. Money had gone missing from the shop again. Ikena confronted Obinna, and the fight was loud enough for everyone in the neighborhood to hear. "You think I don't know it's you?" Ikena shouted. "Why are you doing this? You're my brother." "And you're what?" "My savior." Obinna shot back. "You love to remind me every chance you get that you're better than me." "That's not true," Ikena said. "I want you to succeed. I've done everything I can to help you." "Help?" Obinna laughed bitterly. "You've done nothing but humiliate me. Everyone knows I'm just the failure living in your shadow." After that, Obinna didn't come back to the shop. Ikena was heartbroken. He told me he was thinking about sending Obinna back to the village. "Maybe it's for the best," he said. "He's not happy here, and I don't know how to fix it." That night, I was sitting outside Ikena's house with some tools I'd borrowed earlier. I was planning to return them and head home. I noticed Obinna walking up and down the street, muttering to himself. His hands were clenched, and his movements were erratic. Something about him seemed off, but I didn't think too much of it. I should have. When Ikena got home, I heard their voices from inside the house. At first, it was low and tense, but it quickly escalated. Ikena was trying to reason with him, but Obinna wasn't listening. Then came the scream. It was sharp, piercing, and filled with pain. I rushed inside and froze at the doorway. Ikena was on the floor, blood pooling around him. His eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. Obinna was standing over him, a kitchen knife in his hand. His chest was heaving, his face a mix of anger and something that looked like relief. "I had no choice, Chike," he said, his voice trembling. "He made me do it." He wouldn't stop. I stepped back, my heart racing. "Obinna, what have you done? He's your brother." "He wasn't my brother anymore," Obinna said, his voice hollow. "He was just in the way." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just anger, this was something darker, something I couldn't understand. Slowly, I backed out of the house and called the police. When they arrived, Obinna didn't resist. He let them take him away, his eyes glazed over like he wasn't really there. As they carried Ikenna's body out of the house, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Could I have stopped this? Should I have done more? The days that followed were a blur. The neighborhood was in shock. People who knew the brothers couldn't make sense of it. They were family, one woman said. How could this happen? But it did happen, and no one could change that. At the funeral, their parents were inconsolable. Their mother wept openly, clutching a picture of her two sons as children. Where did I go wrong? She kept asking. How could this happen? I didn't have an answer for her. I still don't. I keep replaying that night in my head, wondering if there was something I missed, some warning sign I failed to act on. But the truth is, jealousy doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. I visit Ikenna's grave often. I sit there and talk to him, telling him about the shop, the neighborhood, and how much everyone misses him. I also think about Obinna, sitting in a prison cell, haunted by what he's done. This story isn't just about two brothers. It's a lesson about the dangers of envy, how it can grow and fester until it destroys everything in its path. Ikenna didn't deserve what happened to him, and neither did their parents. But life doesn't always give us the endings we hope for. It just gives us the consequences of our choices. And some choices can never be undone. The weeks following Ikenna's death were a blur of grief and disbelief. The house that once buzzed with activity was now eerily silent. People avoided walking past it, as though the tragedy had left an invisible scar on the street. The bloodstains had long been cleaned, but the memory of that night lingered like a shadow. The community was divided. Some blamed Obinna outright, calling him wicked and ungrateful. Others tried to understand what might have driven him to such an act. Maybe the pressure was too much, one woman whispered at the market. Living in Ikenna's shadow must have been unbearable. But I couldn't bring myself to sympathize with Obinna. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ikenna lying there, his life stolen by the very person he had tried to help. The trial began 2 months after the murder. I was called as a witness, along with a few other neighbors who had heard the argument that night. Sitting in the courtroom, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. Obinna sat in the defendant's chair, looking gaunt and unkempt. He didn't meet anyone's eyes, not even his parents, who sat at the back of the room, their faces etched with sorrow. The prosecution painted a clear picture of premeditation. They argued that Obinna's jealousy had been festering for years and that he had gone to Ikenna's house that night intending to kill him. The defense, on the other hand, tried to frame it as a crime of passion, a momentary lapse brought on by years of emotional strain. When it was my turn to testify, I recounted everything I had seen and heard. My voice shook as I described finding Ikenna's body and the look on Obinna's face. I tried to stay composed, but the memory was too raw. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face. Obinna didn't say much during the trial. When asked why he had done it, he simply said, "I didn't mean for it to happen. I just couldn't take it anymore." His words hung in the air, heavy with regret but offering little comfort. The trial lasted 3 weeks. In the end, the judge sentenced Obinna to life in prison. As the verdict was read, I glanced at his parents. His mother sobbed quietly into her hands, while his father stared straight ahead, his face expressionless. The aftermath of the trial was just as painful. The community struggled to come to terms with what had happened. For weeks, people gathered in small groups, whispering about the tragedy. Some blamed Ikenna for pushing Obinna too hard, though those voices were quickly drowned out by others who defended him. Ikenna's parents couldn't bring themselves to return to the house in Lagos. They stayed in the village, retreating into their grief. The once celebrated family became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly envy could destroy everything. I found myself visiting the shop less and less. It didn't feel the same without Ikenna there. Eventually, I decided to leave Lagos altogether. The memories were too heavy, the streets too full of ghosts. But the story didn't end there. Obinna's actions left ripples that touched everyone who had known him and Ikenna. Their old friends in the village spoke of them often, trying to make sense of how two brothers who had once been so close could end up on such a tragic path. Years later, I heard that Obinna had become deeply religious in prison. He had written a letter to his parents, begging for forgiveness, though I don't know if they ever responded. Some said he was trying to atone for his sins, others thought it was just a way to ease his conscience. As for me, I still carry the weight of that night. I tell the story whenever I can, not to dwell on the pain but to warn others about the dangers of jealousy and unchecked resentment. Ikenna's life was a testament to hard work and generosity, but it was also a reminder that even the brightest lights can be extinguished by darkness. The house where it all happened still stands, though no one has lived there since. People say it's cursed, that the spirits of the two brothers linger there, trapped by the unfinished business of their lives. I don't believe in ghosts, but sometimes, late at night, I find myself thinking about that house and the lives it holds in its walls. In the end, the story of Ikenna and Obinna isn't just about them. It's about all of us, about the choices we make and the consequences we face. It's a story that reminds us to cherish what we have, to nurture love instead of letting jealousy take root. Because once it does, it can grow into something that destroys everything in its path.
Did you enjoy the story? If you did, please give us a like, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to comment, let us know what you think about this story, and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you.